We're on top of Zayin and Beis, second line. We were in the middle of discussing the beginning of the Gemara of Zayin was talking about a man who marries half of a woman, or the woman is married to half of him. And the Gemara says you can't marry half a woman. And if you say that the woman is married to half of you, basically what the husband's saying is that he reserves the right to take a second partner. The Gemara addressed a point of whether or not the Kiddushin should spread to the entire woman, just like it does by Bali Chaim, with regard to an animal that's sacrificed, that's proclaimed, or at least partially proclaimed as a sacrifice. I think Gemara differentiates between das acheres and the carbon. When there's a das acheres, meaning it requires two consenting parties, then you don't say lifshit kedusha bekula. The kedusha can't spread because it requires specific consent. The Gemara compared it to an animal that's owned by two partners, and one partner sanctifies half the animal as a sacrifice, and then he buys the other half, where we don't say lifshit kedusha bekula. And the Gemara brought out the concept of dichoy, 3 areas of dichoy, balachayim, dichoy mekara, and dichoy bedamim, which is complicated. We explained yesterday. Can you help? We'll discuss that separately. Now we get to a similar subject. Boy rova, chatzich b'chatzi pruta v'chatzich b'chatzi pruta. So here he marries the whole woman, but each half with a half a pruta. Mao, what's the story? Kiven the amar lo chatzi pruta paska. Since he says half a pruta, we say paska, so that sort of breaks it, and therefore it's two separate transactions of half of a woman, and it's not kosher. Or do we say no? He's sort of it's like when you count money, you're sort of just counting all the components, but it's really one kedushin of the whole woman. If you say that this is a scenario of ma'anav halach, what happens if he says chatzich b'pruta v'chatzich b'pruta? Mahu kim the amrlo pruta pascal melsa adoma kol b'yom ma'anav halach. So over here, what he did was he married each half of the woman with a full pruta. Do we say that, look, if it's a pruta, it's a substantial amount, not substantial, but it's at least something, and therefore, when you do half a pruta and half a pruta, so half a pruta is nothing. Therefore, it's obvious the guy is ma'anav halach. He's counting up different portions until you have one unit of a pruta. But maybe where you have a unit of a pruta, maybe it becomes two separate transactions. Each transaction of half a woman, and therefore the Kiddushin is not valid. Or do we say no? As long as it happened on the same day, it's ma'anav halach. He's just counting on, and he's adding on to the count. He's tallying the count. If you're saying he's just adding up a tally, what happens? What happens if he does it in 2 separate days? Half of you is today for pruta, half of you tomorrow for pruta. Do we say it's 2 different days, it's 2 separate transactions, and the Kiddushin is not valid? Or do we say perhaps the Kiddushin begins today, but it doesn't finish until tomorrow? But it's really one long Kiddushin. Okay. Another question. Shnei chatziech b'pruta. Your both halves of you should be one pruta. He effectively saying it at once. Or do we say that there's no such thing as half Keddushins? You can't even just specifying 2 halves with 1 pruta itself is enough to invalidate the Kiddushin. And of course, the Gemara ends with take it, let it stand. Boy Rava. Rava has the following question. Rava here is taking the place of Rabbi Dovid Yehudah. So this happens every now and then. I was once by an offer of the Shabbos Chassan right before the marriage of a couple that was getting married. A brother was marrying his sister-in-law's sister, and the girl was marrying her brother-in-law's brother. So 2 brothers married 2 sisters. It happens every now and then. You have two daughters, 2 sons. So the guy wants to marry off. he serves as a representative to two of his sons, and he wants to give Kiddushin to this guy's two daughters. So there's two Kiddushins going on here, but he wants them all to take place with just one pruta. Do you go based on the one who gives and the one who receives? And there is at least one pruta here. Or do you go based on the woman? And there's no pruta for each woman. We're on Zayin 7b, but halfway down the page. So the Gemara says, there is no money. And the Gemara says, Teku, let it stand. Next question. So, this is a little bit crass, but it's bitcha uparaska bepruta. Your daughter and your ox for one pruta. Mahu. Miamrina, do we say bitcha b'chatzi pruta, paraska b'chatzi pruta? Your daughter for half a pruta and your ox for half a pruta. And therefore, Kiddushin is not valid.
If the kid's a teenager, it's free. Forget the pruta. Just take.
Okay, do we say each one's a half a pruta, and therefore there isn't a full money for the Kiddushin? Or do we say the daughter here is getting Kiddushin for one pruta, and the power is being sold with Mashicha, standard kinyan, but not necessarily for money. The Gemara says, Teku, let it stand. Boy Rav Ashi, bitcha v'karka'acha bepruta. Your daughter and your land for pruta. Mahu. Do we say bitcha b'chatzi pruta v'karka'acha b'chatzi pruta? Your daughter and your land each for half a pruta. Idilma bitcha b'pruta v'karka'ach b'chazaka. Or do we say that the daughter for pruta and the land is acquired through chazaka, standard kinyan of karka? The Gemara again says, Teku, it remains unresolved. Who gavra the akish b'shiroi? There is somebody who gave Kiddushin with shiroi. Shiroi, I think, is rags. Can they translate it?
Silk.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay. Somebody gave Kiddushin with silk. We'll have to see how much the value of the silk was. We'll get to it in a moment. Rabbi Amar loy tzrich chishuma. It does not require an evaluation. Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef says tzrich chishuma. It does require an evaluation. Okay, and the Gemara will explain. Ida Amar lehu b'koldahu kula amar lepligid loy tzrich chishuma. This is, by the way, what we do today. Not every rabbi does it. I think by my wedding they did not do it, but I've heard that by many other weddings they do it. What do we do? So the custom is to give a ring. It's a simple ring. There's no engraving. There is no diamond on it. It's a wedding, what they call wedding band. And often the rabbi officiating will tell the woman that we think this is gold, but even if it's not, this is certainly worth 5 cents, whatever it is, certainly worth a dime. And if you accept this, you're accepting it as potentially even up to a dime. If it turns out that the wedding band is counterfeit, you're agreeing to the marriage anyway. So if the guy makes that statement, he says, here's the silk item, you're getting his Kiddushin b'koldu with whatever it's worth. So nobody disagrees. It does not require an evaluation. Okay. If, let's say, he said it's worth 50 coins and they evaluated and it's not worth 50 coins. It's not Kiddushin because she was relying on 50 coins. He didn't give her 50 coins. It's not a good Kiddushin. So what's the debate? The Amar Chamshin v'Shavu Chamshin. He said it's worth 50 coins, and it actually was. He said it's 50 coins, and it actually was worth 50 coins. Rabbi Amar Leitzrich Shuma Hashavu Chamshin. Rav says that it does not require an evaluation before she accepts it. Rav Yosef Amar Tzrich Shuma. Rav Yosef says it requires an evaluation prior to her accepting it. Since a woman doesn't actually know the value, so therefore she doesn't rely on it until it's properly evaluated. 1 second. And therefore, so in other words, according to Rav Yosef, if it was not evaluated prior to her receiving the item, the Kiddushin is not valid because she's not relying on the Kiddushin until it's properly evaluated, since she doesn't know what the value is. Okay. And in the first version of the Gemara, we're talking about where she's expecting the value to be at least 50 coins. The second version, Ikadamri, there's another version of the Gemara, but Kol Hunami Pligi. There's debate here also with regard to the guy who says, here is these silk items, even if it should be Kiddushin for whatever they're worth. If Yosef Amar Shava Kesef Harek Kesef. Ma Kesef to Kayetz, Af Shava Kesef Nami to Kayetz. Yosef's argument here is entirely different. A woman has to know what she's getting. Just like when she gets money, when she gets $100, she knows that $100 is worth $100. So too, when you give her a bundle of silk, she has to know what the actual value of the item is. Amr Yosef, so Yosef says, how do I know that this concept is true? The Tanya we learn, the Ketzef Miknasai, the Ketzef Unikna, the Ein Nikna Betvua the Kalim. 1 second. Okay, when an Eved Ivri sells himself, we'll learn more about the ways of acquiring an Eved Ivri and the ways of freeing an Eved Ivri, how a Eved Ivri is kind of as atzmai. And one of the ways is bepidyon. You prorate the total amount based on the amount of time served, and if he redeems himself, then he can buy himself back. The kesef uniknev ein niknev b'tfuah v'kelim. Okay, the kesef uniknev ein niknev b'tfuah v'kelim. He has to redeem himself specifically with money, but not tfuah v'kelim, not with grain or vessels. So the Gemara says, "Hi tfuah v'kelim heichidami." What exactly does that mean with grain or vessels, items? If you mean to say that he cannot be acquired at all with grain, but the problem is the general rule here is that shavik kesef is kesef. You can pay. If you're obligated to pay money, paying value by giving something equivalent to money, so that would be, let's say, giving a used car as payment, that is equal to pay money, and therefore one second. And therefore, the Eved Ivri could redeem himself, let's say, by paying the amount of grain in value as the amount required to redeem himself. Okay. So the question is, why can't the slave redeem himself with grain? Grain should be like shavik kesef. It should be something equivalent to money. It has value, and that amount of value should serve as the vehicle for redemption. The if there is nothing of value there, if there's nothing of value, then even if he gave coins like pennies to redeem himself, that also wouldn't count. Meaning he can't redeem 1 penny worth of his time. You'd have to redeem, let's say, a minimum of a nickel. Okay, elolav to isbu shava pruta. It must be that there is a shava pruta. 1 second. Elolav to isbu shava pruta. It must be that we're talking about enough grain here that there is an amount of a shava pruta, a minimum amount. The kivan de lekaitzi loy. But the problem here is, because we don't know the value of the amount of grain that he's giving, therefore, it cannot serve as a vehicle to redemption. In other words, what Rabbi Yosef is pointing out here is that we require a shuma, we require an evaluation. If you want to make a fixed payment to redeem yourself, we require that the items you use to redeem yourself be evaluated first. If they're not evaluated, then you cannot redeem yourself. Similarly, with regard to Kiddushin, if you're giving the woman something for Kiddushin, item of value, it must be evaluated prior to her accepting it. Okay, the idach and the other opinion. Now, 1 second here. Okay, what about Rava? Rava disagrees. Rava says we don't require an evaluation. 1 second. Okay, so Rav Yosef is understanding the limitation of a slave acquiring his freedom with tfuah and kalim, grain and vessels. That limitation is that it requires an evaluation to know what it's worth. Rav, on the other hand, Rav has a completely different understanding here. The concept here is that you can use tfuah and kalim for a slave to acquire his freedom, but only if it's used as money, meaning it's a monetary transaction. I'm giving you a payment of value here. Happens to be the amount that the actual value is carried by grain. What that works, but what doesn't work? What's the limitation here? If it's done b'teras chalipin. So in other words, if this is a way to acquire the slave through chalipin does not work for a slave. Okay, there's just one problem here. Rav Nachman, Amar Peres le'avi chalipin. Rav Nachman says the commodities cannot be used for chalipin. So in that case, grain is never able to be used as chalipin. So why does a Torah need to tell me that you can't use grain as chalipin for an Eved Ivri to acquire his own freedom? Grain can never be used as chalipin. It's never even an issue. So the Torah certainly doesn't need to tell you that for an Eved Ivri, it's not necessary. It's never necessary. So Michael Mayer. So then, what exactly is the Torah excluding here? Okay, so Gemara says, we're talking about a scenario where the grain and the vessels are not even worth shava pruta, some minimal amount, a nickel. And that you're asking, my area tfuah v'kelim. What's unique to tfuah v'kelim? I feel kesef nami. Even money also. Money that, if you give a guy coins that are less than a shava pruta, let's say a couple of pennies, you can't redeem them either. So the Gemara says, lo mi kamer. The Torah says that two things are excluded. Not just that if you give money that's less than a shava pruta, you can't redeem him, but also if you give value less than a shava pruta, you also can't redeem him. Why would I think that money and value would be different? It could be that if you give value, let's say some amount of grain, at least the grain is usable. You know, the money you don't have to put into a piggy bank until you get a nickel to be able to use it. The grain is usable, and therefore, you know, you can add it to your dough and make a challah with it or something like that. So therefore, maybe less than a shava pruta of grain would be valid for a kinyan. Kamash malon that it's not valid for a kinyan. Okay, so this first attempt, which is the redemption of an Eved Ivri, is clearly a debate here between Rava and Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says it's about evaluation. That's why you cannot redeem an Eved Ivri with grain or vessels. And Rav has two versions. One version is you can't redeem it with grain or vessels because it's chalipin. But if you actually do it as a monetary transaction, it is acceptable. And the other opinion is that it's even if it's less than a shava pruta, I would think maybe because you can at least benefit from it immediately. Therefore, it should work. Kamash Malon, the pasuk is telling us that Torah says it does not work. You can't redeem an Eved Ivri with minimal amounts of grain and vessels. Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, next attempt. Where is another source for this concept that in order for Shavah Kesef to be valued, to be considered equivalent to money, it has to be evaluated. The Tanya we learned. Egel zel pidyon b'ni. So this is the concept that there is the halacha of pidyon haben. Firstborn needs to be redeemed. Every firstborn male, unless they're born to a kohen or a levi, whether it's the father or the mother. Yitanya egel zel pidyon b'ni. Tal zel pidyon b'ni. Egel is a calf for pidyon haben. Tal zel pidyon b'ni, or talis a shirt. Loyam or klomit, these are not valid types of pidyon haben. However, he says egel zeh b'chomish shlom lepidyon b'ni. The amount that you need to give is 5 coins, 5 shlom. So if you say that this calf should be pidyon haben, it doesn't work. You need to give 5 coins. What happens if you say egel zeh b'chomish shlom lepidyon b'ni? This calf is equal to 5 coins to redeem my son, or talazeh, this shirt, it should be to you chomish shlom, the 5 coins lepidyon b'ni, to pay for the pidyon haben. B'nai podei, the son is redeemed. So the Gemara says, "Hi pidyon hechidami." What's the story with this redemption? If it's not worth 5 coins, then kol kamine. Then why is he believed to say it's worth 5 coins? It's clearly not worth 5 coins. Elalav, it must be alpha gab shavi, even though it is worth 5 coins. To kivin to like haitzi, since we don't know what it's worth, then the redemption is not valid. It's only when you said it, you say this calf is worth 5 coins. That's when it's a good pidyon haben. But if you didn't set the value, says Rav Yosef, this is proof. If you didn't set the value, it's not a good pidyon haben. Says Rav Yosef, this is a source of his opinion that you need to have an evaluation. You need to have a set value when you're dealing with items of value, shavah kesef, to know what it's worth in terms of money, kesef.
So why do we go to so much trouble to find?
We'll get to it. You don't have to. We'll get to it in a moment. So the Gemara says, "Lo olam de lo shavi." The truth of the matter is that this calf is not even worth 5 coins. This shirt is worthless. It's a worn shirt. We could go into kabel kain iluye. The kain accepts it as that value. Gemara explains. Okay, this is one of the sources, by the way, for the minhag to wear yarmulke, cover your heads. In the Talmudic times, it was only more honorable people that wore yarmulkes. He would take a head covering by pidyon haben. He would say that and he would say, this head covering is worth to me 5 coins. Amar Rashi says, Rav Kahana is a great rabbi. He needs to wear what we call a yarmulke. He needs to wear a covering on his head, hat. But for a regular person, we don't believe him to say this hat is worth 5 coins. So Rabbi Rashi also was an honorable great rabbi, and he needed to buy a hat. So he spent on a $10 hat, he spent $13. He overpaid. You see that this is something that they consider valuable. I'll tell you an interesting story. My Rosh Yeshiva, Eliyahu Dev Wachtfeigel, Eliyahu Dev Wachtfeigel, Beliaber they call him.
All right.
Beliaber Wachtfeigel. He's the first one. Whenever he meets a kohen that's miyuches, like an old traditional kohen, he does pidyon haben for himself as a chumrah. See, one day he was in a very wealthy person's house, very, very wealthy person, and there happened to have been someone there who was a kohen talking, and the guy mentioned how he's a kohen miyuches. He has his family history back hundreds of thousands of years. So Rabbi Bar says to him, as a chumrah, I like to do pidyon haben. In case the first kohen wasn't a kosher kohen, I'd like to do pidyon haben again. He takes off his hat. He says, "Is this hat worth to you 5 coins?" So the kohen says, "Yeah." So he gives him the hat. He gives him his Rosh Yeshiva hat. And the guy doesn't need a Rosh Yeshiva hat. So he thanks Rosh Yeshiva for his hat. And then he says, "Yeah, by the way, I don't need the hat." Now it happens to have been that the wealthy guy that was sitting there was also a firstborn. So he saw the Yeshiva being paid himself as a chomer. He said, "I'm going to do it also." So he went to his china closet. He pulled out a beautiful silver becher, and he gave it to the kohen. He says, "Is this worth 5 coins?" So the kohen took it, he put it in his pocket, and he took it home with him. I think yeah. Anyway, but of course the traditional custom is to give 5 silver coins of the local currency. Today we give silver dollars. In Israel they have like a fancy silver shekel that the mint makes. So they use though. It's supposed to be legal tender also. Okay. Next Gemara. Amar Belazar. Iskachli b'mana v'nasan l'dinner. He says to the woman, "You should. I'm giving you a mana $100 for the Kiddushin. V'nasan l'dinner." He gives her whatever it is. How many mana is in the dinner? I don't remember. Whatever it is, he gives her $10. It's a valid Kiddushin, and he has to pay up the remaining $90. Oh, it's okay. So it's $1. Yashlam, and he has to pay up $99. My time, even the Amr Lamana, since he says to her 100, the Yav dinner, and he gives him only one. Command the Amr Law. It says effectively what's going on is that we understand this as almanas dummy, on condition that you pay up the remainder 99 points. For Omer of Huna Amarav, Rav Huna says in the name of Rav Kol Omer almanas kamer me'ashim. So this in gittin a few times. Someone who says almanas, it's as if he's saying me'ashim. Okay, so what does that mean? He says to her, she says, I want $100 for Kiddushin. He says, sure, you're Mekudeshes with this dollar. We understand that to mean that she's saying, on condition that you give me the remaining 99. And every conditional, an almanas statement is now on condition that you pay up the rest. So effectively, the Kiddushin happens immediately, and he has to pay up $99. Meisvei, question. I'd like to get married with $100. He's counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And he's busy counting up dollar bills. And her hand is like this, she stretches out her hand, and he's counting up the dollars. $67. And then she decides, you know what? I'm done. I'm not interested. She wants to change any one of them, him or her. Want to change their mind? I feel a bit dinner achron or just they can change their mind even at $1.99. Okay, hold on a second. Clearly here, the Kiddushin is not valid until the full payment is made. What's the difference? It says, we're talking about a scenario where he says that this, okay, she says, I want $100. He says, okay, here's the Kiddushin with this $100. And he starts counting out dollars into her hands. $99, one of them changes their mind. That is acceptable. It can withdraw from the Kiddushin before the full $100 payment is made, because he specified it's this specific $100. So the Gemara says, Hamid is safe, Manazu, Reisha Manastam. There's just one problem with that. The end of that brisa talks about a scenario of Manazu, where he specifies this $100. Evidently, that means the first scenario is where he did not specify this specific $100. How do we know this? The Katani Sefer, the end of the brisa says, Amrullah says to her, Iskachli b'manazu, marry me with this mana, the nimtza mana chaser dinner. One second. Again, he says to her, marry you with this specific $100. It turns out of the $100, dinner, there's only 99. Or a dinner shalachayshis. Let's say there was one of the dinarim were made out of copper, not of silver. I guess the equivalent would be something like a ripped dollar. One that they can't really be used. And in Mekudeshes, the Kiddushin is now valid. If it's dinara, if it's it's a type of coin that people wouldn't want to accept. It's worn out. Maybe it's clipped. The old days used to clip the coins to shave off silver and then melt the silver and sell it. So maybe the coin was clipped too much. Nobody would want to take it. Harezim Mekudeshes, then the Kiddushin is valid. V'yachlef, and he has to switch it for a newer coin, and we'll discuss this in a moment. Anyway, clearly here, the second part of the brisa is talking about manazu, meaning the first part is talking about where he didn't say specifically this $100. He's counting out the money, and still the halacha is she can withdraw from the Kiddushin. We don't say there's an almanas that the Kiddushin is valid and just has to pay up the rest. So the Gemara says no. Both the beginning and the brayso are both statements where he said this specific mana. Pirush kamafarish, and the Gemara is explaining. If one of them wants to withdraw, then they have the permission to withdraw until the final dinner is paid. Exactly how does this work? You're going to Amar Lab Manasum, a scenario where he said Manasum. And what else is the story if you say Manazu? If there's a missing dollar or one of the dollars is copper, then the Kiddushin is not valid. This also makes sense. The Isak, if you're going to say Reisha b'manastam, that the first part of the brisa is a stam mana where he didn't specify this $100. Hashta b'manastam lo have a Kiddushin b'manazumi bai. If in the scenario where he says manastam, he says I'm going to give you $100, and he starts counting out the money, and and then she wants to withdraw at $1.99. She's allowed to. If that scenario she's allowed to withdraw, for sure in a scenario where he says manazu, where he says this specific $100, for sure it has to be correct and accurate. Why would the brayso need to repeat itself? It must be that actually the brayso is all talking about one scenario of manazu. However, the Gemara is not convinced that is a good state, that's a valid proof. Why? Because imisham hal area. That argument that if it says manastam, I for sure know manazu. Why? Because Tana Sefer will be Reisha. Shalai Tema Reisha Manazu. Ava Manastam, Ava Kiddushin. Tana Sefer Manazu, Machal Reisha Manastam. It needed to say Manazu and Manastam because if it didn't say Manazu at the end, I would think the first part of the brayso of Manastam is not Manastam, it's Manazu. The more limited case. So therefore it had to say the second scenario is the more limited case, and I understand from there the first scenario was the more expansive case. That even in a scenario where he says manastam, the Kiddushin is not valid. So there's no proof exactly from here that the first part of the brayso is manastam. Okay, so again, let's just briefly recap here. So the Gemara's question is, the Gemara is saying that if he gives $100. She asks for $100. He gives her $1. We say it's almanas. The Kiddushin works and he has to pay up. Why is that different from the guy counting out the $100? The Gemara says the guy counting out the $100. He said manazu. I'll prove it to you. He says manazu because otherwise, why is the brayso saying? Sorry, because if he said manastam, then the brayso repeats itself. The Gemara says no. That's not a great proof. You could say that the brayso is manazu, but the proof is not so great. Rav Ashi says there's no need to say it's a scenario of manasum. Rav Ashi on Ramona shiny. If the guy is counting out the money, that's different. The daiti akula, because then it's not a condition. Clearly, she intends on receiving the full payment immediately. It's not in a case where he gives her $1, so clearly, and she accepts it. Clearly, she's saying, "Pay me the 99 later." But in a case where he's counting out the money, clearly she wants the whole thing up front, and therefore, the Kiddushin is only valid when he finishes counting. Okay, says the Gemara. Hi, dinner the copper coin. What's the story? If she knew that it was a copper coin, evidently she accepted it. But so he paid her the money at night. She couldn't see that it was a copper coin. So he stacked the coins. So he put a couple of silver coins on top and slipped a copper coin on bottom and sort of tricked her. And that's why the Kiddushin is not valid, because she was expecting silver and in the end she gets copper. Says the Gemara, high dinner raw, a bad dinner. What does that mean? If it's not spendable, high dinner that's the same as a copper dinner. It's a coin that most people wouldn't want to accept. It's $1, it's 3/4 ripped. You'll have to go to a bank to change it. Nobody's going to want it. That's what it means. So technically speaking, it's legal tender. It could be used, but because nobody wants it, he's obligated to switch it out for a new coin that presumably is what she was expecting. Have a great day.